Okay, welcome in one and all. I'm now going to review all of Wednesday's games and Thursday's games as well. When I do the Thursday's games, I'll do the teams that I thought would win and the teams that actually did win. Unfortunately, I just didn't have time to make my preview for Thursday's matchup. But as for Wednesday, there was just the lone game. The Washington Capitals took on the New Jersey Devils in New Jersey. I did predict that New Jersey would get the victory. Unfortunately, it was not meant to be as the Capitals finally came alive and got a huge win, to say the least. 6-4 was the final score. Anthony Mantha would kick things off in the first, an even strength goal from Protas, make it 1-0. Dylan Strome would then score, give the Capitals a 2-0 lead, just under 5 minutes to go in the frame. An even strength goal from Ovechkin and Tom Wilson. And then Sonny Milano, with about 2.5 minutes to go, they get an even strength goal from Oshie and Kuznetsov. So it's 3-0 for the Capitals heading into the second period. Tyler Toffoli would get the Devils on the board to cut the lead at 3-1 with about 4.5 minutes into the period. An even strength goal from Meyer and Hughes. Meyer would then get the Devils their second goal of the game to cut the lead to 3-2. I want to say roughly 50 seconds after that. An even strength goal from Jack Hughes and Tyler Toffoli. So all three of them scoring or being on the score sheet to start things off. Nico Hischier would then score about a minute and 20 seconds after that to tie things up for the Devils. An even strength goal from Jesper Brett and Marino, and that happened at the 6 minute and 42-second mark of that period. And then Tyler Toffoli would actually give the Devils a 4-3 lead heading into the third period, about 10 minutes into that frame, assisted by Luke Hughes and Jack Hughes. So it was 4-3 for the Devils heading into the third and final frame. From there, the Capitals absolutely just took over, scoring 3 straight goals. Dylan Strome would tie things up on a power play about 20 seconds into that third period, assisted by Kuznetsov and John Carlson. Connor McMichael would then increase the lead to 5-4. About 2 minutes and 9 seconds into that third period, an even strength goal from Mantha and Backstrom. Ovechkin would then get a late goal, about a minute and a half to go. No assists on his goal. So 6-4 was the final from New Jersey. So coming into this game, I was sitting at 58-40. Obviously, I lost this bet. So 58-41 is where I stood after Wednesday's games. I do apologize. So coming into the Thursday's matchup, take a look at the teams that played and who I think would have won and who actually would have won. I'm very much aware that now that the games are all done, that it may seem like, oh, I've just choose that team because they won. No, I would have chose that team if I had that time to make my predictions. So I'm just going to quickly take a look at the schedule and go from there. So our first matchup takes place in Quebec, where we have the team that I bleed Bleu, Blanc, et Rouge for, and that is the Montreal Canadiens, and they were playing host to the Columbus Blue Jackets. And the only reason I would have predicted that my team to win, not because I'm biased, is because I felt that coming into the matchup, despite the fact they both were 3-win teams, I thought that the rest would do them well after coming off a loss in the previous matchup, and that would help them be able to inevitably defeat the Blue Jackets. And it was looking very grim, to say the least. They had to come back in this particular matchup just to be able to force overtime, and then obviously in overtime, Goal Caulfield, as his nickname goes, would be the hero of that particular match. So Jack Roslovic, with a pretty big game to say the least, will kick things off about 2 minutes and 46 seconds into that first frame. An even strength goal from Johnny Gaudreau and Marinsky. Emil Benstrom will get a power play goal with about 2 minutes and 40 seconds left in that first period, assisted by Perovov and Roslovic. So it was 2-0 for the Blue Jackets heading into the second second period. Nick Suzuki would then get the Habs on the board. It was actually a giveaway that led to his scoring chance roughly 30 seconds into the frame, so it was 2-1 at that point. Emil Bemstrom would then increase the lead. I want to say about just over 6 minutes to go in the frame. A power play goal from Roslovic and Voronov, so it was 3-1 for the Blue Jackets at that point. With just about 20 seconds to go in that second period, Mike Matheson would then get a power play goal from Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield to tie things up. To decrease the lead to 3-2 at that point. Sean Monahan in the third would then tie things up with about 8 minutes into that period. A power play goal from Cole Caulfield and Mike Matheson. So it was 3-3 at that point in time. And then with just about 40 seconds to go in overtime, as I mentioned at the start, Cole Caulfield would then get the game-winning goal. 4-3 was the final score. Nick Suzuki and Jordan Harris would assist on the play. So I'm kind of going with the fly here as I'm writing everything down. So the Canadians now improved to 4-2-1 on the season. And Columbus, if I take a look at the record, where are you? They are now sitting at 3-3-0. They're back to 500. So I would have been 1-0 on my predictions thus far. There were 11 games on tap, so I had 10 other games to look into. Our next matchup takes place in Massachusetts, where we had our first of two upsets, to say the least, as we had the undefeated Boston Bruins, and they were taking on the Anaheim Ducks. Obviously, Boston being undefeated, I would have had them favored in this matchup, and they looked like they were going to pull away with the victory, but a late surge by the Anaheim Ducks prevailed them to tie things up, and then in overtime get the victory. So the undefeated streak for the Boston Bruins has now officially come to an end. In the first period, Radko Gudas would get the lone goal at the 15-minute mark, I should say. The first even strength goal from Vakanainen and Ryan Strome, so it was 1-0 for the Ducks heading into the second period. Charlie Coyle with a power play goal with about 1 minute and 40 seconds into that second period, assisted by Pasternak and McAvoy. Matt Grzelcyk would then score at the 3-minute mark of the second to increase the lead to 2-1 for an even strength goal from McAvoy and Poitras, if I'm pronouncing that name correctly. And with about, I want to say, just over 3 minutes to go in that second period, I should say, Pasternak would then increase the lead to 3-1, an even strength goal from Zacha and McAvoy. So it's 3-1 for the Bruins heading into the third period. Lee Carlson would cut the lead to 3-2 with just under 2 minutes to go in that period. An even strength goal from Terry and Carrick. And then with 15 seconds to go, Troy Terry would tie things up for the Ducks. An even strength goal from Mint Yukov and Ryan Strome. So it was all tied up, obviously, heading into overtime. Just over 2 minutes into the overtime period, Mason McTavish would crush the Bruins in overtime. And an even strength goal from Carlson and Lacombe. So 4-3 was the final. So the Ducks secure a huge win while the Bruins suffer their first loss of the season. So the Bruins now sitting at 5-0-1. And the Anaheim Ducks are sitting at 2-4-0. So I would have had that prediction wrong. Obviously, I would have favored the Bruins in that matchup. The next matchup takes place in Raleigh, where we have the Carolina Hurricanes, who are taking on the Seattle Kraken. Now, both of these teams are kind of wishy-washy, to say the least. Coming into the matchup, I would have predicted the Kraken would have gotten the victory only because the Hurricanes at that point were on a 3-game losing streak, and it wasn't looking too good, to say the least. It took until overtime to decide a winner, so both these teams got one respectively, but the Hurricanes ended up getting the win to finally stop the bleeding, to say the least. So in the first period, Oliver Bjorkstrand would kick things off at just about, I'll say 8.5 minutes into that 8.5 minutes to go in the first. An even strength goal from Schwartz and Olesiak. Devon Shore would then increase the lead to 2-0. I want to say just over 5 minutes to go. An even strength goal from Yorkred. Martin Nietzsche would then decrease the lead to 2-1 with 1 minute and 40 seconds to go. An even strength goal from Bunting and Kotkaniemi. So it was 2-0 for the Kraken heading into the second, where there weren't any goals in that second frame. It took all the way into the third period, which is about 4.5 minutes to go, where Jesperi Kotkaniemi would tie things up. An even strength goal from Nietzsche and Shea. It was tied heading into overtime, where Martin Nietzsche would score with about 10 seconds left, so it was that close to heading into a shootout. He would get the game-winning goal from D'Angelo and Sebastian Aho. So with that, Seattle and Carolina. So now the Hurricanes, if I can find them on my paper, they are now sitting at 4-3-0 on the season, while the Seattle Kraken, with the overtime loss, are now sitting at 1-4-2. So not off to the best start with this season so far. So take a look at our next matchup, which takes place in Michigan, where we have the Detroit Red Wings, who are seemingly on an unbelievable start to the season, taking on the Winnipeg Jets. I would have guessed that the Red Wings could have bounced back after losing their previous matchup, but it was not meant to be. Final score from Detroit was 4-1 for the Winnipeg Jets. So I'll take a look at the scoring summary in just a moment. So 2 goals in the first, both by the Jets. Nick Ehlers would score with about 3.5 minutes to go, an even strength goal from Perfetti and Sandberg. Kyle Connor would then increase the lead to 2-0, as the lone assist was from Josh Morrissey. So 2-0 heading into the second period. Luke Raymond would then decrease the lead to 2-1 with an even strength goal from Larkin and Sider, with just over 3 minutes into that second period, but there were no goals after that in that frame. So 2-1 for the Jets heading into the third period. With about 10.5 minutes into that period, Mason Appleton would increase the lead, and even strength goal from Lowry and Niederreiter to 3-1, and Niederreiter would pretty much put the game on ice with just over a minute to go to give the Jets a 4-1 lead. Mason Appleton would assist on that goal as well. So the Jets are now sitting at, where are we with the Jets? They are now back to 500. They're sitting at 3-3-0. And the Red Wings, I believe, now dropped 2 straight games. So that means they should be at 5-2-0, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 5-2-0. So still not the worst start. That's 10 of a possible 14 points. So they're still doing pretty decently to start the year so far. Next matchup is the other upset of the night, and I'll get to that in just a moment. So we head to the state of Pennsylvania, where we have the Pittsburgh Penguins, who aren't off to the best of starts, to say the least, especially with the expectation coming into this year, taking on the Colorado Avalanche. So the Avalanche were obviously undefeated heading into this matchup, so they would have been the favorite team, and I would have picked them to win, but evidently they got shut out. And it's hard to believe that it took this many games to get the Avs to get their first loss of the season, let alone after being so dominant, getting shut out for their first loss of the season. I certainly would have not have guessed or seen that coming. So, look at the goal summary. Just 1 second. Okay. So Riley Smith would kick things off in the first with about 4 minutes and 40 seconds into that frame. No assists on his goal. Riley Smith would then get his second goal of the game with about just over 3 minutes to go in the period, assisted by Malkin and Rust. So it was 2-0 for the Penguins heading into the second period. The lone goal in that second came at the 6-minute mark. Lars Eller would score, assisted by Zohorna. So it's 3-0 for the Penguins heading into the third period. Crosby would get an assist from Gensel with about 10.5 minutes into that period to then increase the lead to 4-0 for the Penguins, and that is where we sat at the final buzzer. So the Colorado Avalanche, after suffering the first loss, they're still pretty good. They've got 10 out of 12 points though so far. 5-1-0 is where they start, or where they sit, I should say. And the Penguins have got back to 500. They are now at 3-3-0. The next matchup takes place in Florida, where we have the Tampa Bay Lightning, and they're taking on the lone team without a victory. So obviously, if I had time to make my predictions, I would have guessed that the Lightning would have gotten the win, and boy oh boy, did they ever. 6-0 was the final score from Tampa. Braden Point would kick things off in the first, about 1 minute and 40 seconds into that frame, assisted by Sergachev and Perbix. Michael Easmont would increase the lead to 2-0 just over 6 minutes into that period, assisted by DeHaan and Perbix, who get a second assist of that game. Steven Stamkos would then increase the lead to 3-0 with over 40 seconds into the period, assisted by Kucherov and Sergachev, so it's 3-0 for the Lightning after 2. Just about 4 minutes into that second period, Brandon Hagel would then increase the lead to 4-0, assisted by Bear Bolly, if I'm pronouncing that name correctly, and Victor Hedman. Nick Paul would then give the Lightning a 5-0 lead, about 7.5 minutes into that period, an even strength goal from Stamkos and Victor Hedman. So it's 5-0 heading in to the third and final frame. Luke Glendening would then increase the lead to 6-0 with just over 15 minutes to go in the period. It was actually at the 5-minute and 44-second mark of that third frame, assisted by Sheary and Radish. So 6-0 was the final from Tampa Bay. So the Sharks, who are struggling mightily, are now sitting at 0-5-1, and the Lightning are now sitting at 3-2-2 to start the season. The next matchup takes place in Pennsylvania, where we have the other team, not Pittsburgh, but Philadelphia, and they are playing host to the Minnesota Wild. This one here was a bit of a coin flip for me because I don't think one team has really been dominant so far in the season over the other. If I had to have had time to make my predictions, I maybe would have went with the Wild, only because, yeah, Philly's off to a great start, but I didn't really truly believe in them. But I would have been completely wrong, as they absolutely dominated. 6-2 was the final score. So take a look at the scoring summary. So Travis Konechny would kick things off in the first. Just about 6 minutes left to go. An even strength goal from Sealer, so it's 1-0 for the Flyers after 1. Sean Couturier would then increase the lead at about the 7.5 minute mark of the second, assisted by Atkinson and Sanheim. That was a power play goal. They would then get a second power play goal from Bobby Brink with just about 10 minutes to go in that period, assisted by Couturier and Cam Atkinson. So it's 3-0 for the Flyers heading into the third. Dakota Mermis would then cut the lead to 3-1 over 3 minutes into that third period. An even strength goal, assisted by Maroon and Merrill. Marcus Foligno would then score about 1 minute and 25 seconds after that to decrease the lead to 3-2, assisted by Johansson and Rossi. After that, the Flyers just took over the game, scoring 3 straight goals. Owen Tippett would increase the lead to 4-2. About 2 minutes after Foligno scored, assisted by Atkinson, even strength goal. Bobby Brink would get his second goal of the game with just under 9 minutes to go in that frame. An even strength goal from Farabee and Sanheim. And Sanheim would then increase the lead to 6-2 with just over 5 minutes to go in that period, assisted by Forster and Konechny. So 6-2 was the final score. So just taking a look at the record. So the Flyers are now improved to 4-1-1. And the Minnesota are now sitting at 2-3-1 so far. Three, four, five, six, seven. Okay, I believe I have 4 games left to cover. The next game takes place on Long Island, where we have the host New York Islanders, and they took on the Ottawa Senators. Coming into the matchup, I would have guessed that the Sens could have prevailed, but it was not meant to be. I believe they've now suffered 3 straight losses, if I'm not mistaken. So 3-2 was the final score in favor of the Islanders. Bo Horvat would kick things off in the first power play goal with just under 3 minutes into that frame, assisted by Palmieri and Dobson. Cal Clutterbuck would increase the lead with just under 7 minutes to go in that frame, assisted by Sazika. So it was 2-0 for the Islanders after 1. Claude Giroux would then cut the lead to 2-1. A power play goal with just under 7 minutes into that frame, assisted by Stützle and Norris. Jacob Chechirkin would actually tie things up for the Sens with just under 8 minutes to go in the period. An even strength goal from Chartier and Kelly. So it was all tied up at 2 after 2. Noah Dobson would then get the go-ahead goal and eventual game-winning goal with just under 7 minutes to go in the third. An even strength goal from Barzal and Horvat. So now, with that being said, so the Senators are now back to 500, sitting at 3-3-0. And the Islanders are sitting at 3-1-1 so far. The next matchup takes place in Texas, where we have the Dallas Stars, and they are playing host to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Coming into the matchup, I would have thought that the Stars, because they're off to such a fantastic start, they would have been able to prevail and get a victory, but it was not meant to be. The final score was 4-1 in favor of Toronto. So we'll take a look at the scoring summary here. Morgan Riley would kick things off in the first with just under 10 minutes to go in the frame, or just over 10 minutes to go in the frame, I should say. An even strength goal from Nylander, so it was 1-0 for the Blue Shirts after 1 period. Mason Marchman would tie things up with just under 9 minutes to go in the second, assisted by Duchesne and Sutter. Mitch Marner would then give the Leafs the lead, 2-1 with just under 2 minutes to go in the period, assisted by Matthews and Yarncroc. So it's 2-1 for the Leafs heading into the third period. Tyler Bertuzzi would get a power play goal, just over 5 minutes to go, just over 5 minutes in the period, I should say, assisted by Riley and Nye. So it's 3-1 at that point. And then John Tavares getting empty netter with just over 10 seconds to go to make it 4-1, the final from Dallas. So the Leafs are now sitting at 5-2-0, if I'm not mistaken. Or they have 4-2-0. No, it's 5-2-0. No, it's 4-2-0. I don't know. Either way, they're playing pretty good. Let's see, 4-2-0, and the Stars, despite the loss, where are we? Are at 3-1-1 so far. They're 4-1-1. Oh my gosh. I think they're 4-1-1. So even though the Stars lost, they're still playing pretty well. Okay, now where are we? So 2 games left to cover, and both of them took place in the province of Alberta. So we have the Calgary Flames, I should say, and they were playing host to the St. Louis Blues. Just because the Flames have been struggling so far, I would have predicted that the Blues would have gotten the victory, and they sure did. 3-0 was the final score. So Kasperi Kapanen would kick things off in the first. Actually, got a short-handed goal with just under 9 minutes into that. Just under 9 minutes to go in the period, assisted by Sundqvist. Nick Leddy would then increase the lead to 2-0 just over 2 minutes after that. An even strength goal from Kevin Hayes and Torpo Checo. So it was 2-0 heading into the second period, where there weren't any goals in the second, and took all the way into the third period with just over 2 minutes left in the period or in the game for Oscar Sundqvist to increase lead to 3-0, assisted by Rob Thomas. So it was 3-0 was the final score from St. Louis. They are now sitting at 3-2-1 so far, and the Flames are sitting at 2-4-1 to start the year. So they're not off to the best of starts, to say the least. And speaking of a team that's not off to the best of starts, the other team in Alberta, in the Edmonton Oilers. They played host to the New York Rangers. Coming into the matchup, I would have guessed that the Rangers would have won, only because they're off to a great start and the Oilers are not. So I'll just jot one more thing down. I'll go over the scoring summary in just a moment. Okay, so scoring summary. Only 3 goals in that game. All from the Rangers. 3-0 was the final score. So there's no goals after the first. So there was some optimism and hope for Oil Country at that point. And ever since after that second period started, it all kind of went downhill. Adam Fox would then kick things off about 3.5 minutes into that period. A power play goal from Trocheck and Panarin. Brandon Schneider would then score with just under 8 minutes to go in the period. So 2 goals from defensemen, assisted by VC and Fox to increase the lead to 2-0. And with just under 2 minutes to go in the period, Alex Lafreniere would then score from Panarin and Schneider to give the Rangers a 3-0 lead after 2. There were no goals in that third period, so 3-0 was the final score from Edmonton. So, looking at the picks and who I would have guessed to win and who I would have gotten wrong. So back to the Blue Jackets in Montreal. I would have predicted Montreal, and they did win. That's 1. I would, between the Ducks and Boston, I would have predicted that Boston would win, but they didn't. So that's 1-1. Between Seattle and Carolina, I would have guessed that Carolina would have gotten I would have guessed Seattle would have gotten the victory, and they lost. So I was 1-2. Winnipeg and Detroit, I would have guessed Detroit. They lost 1-3. So not very good so far. Between Colorado and Pittsburgh, I always would have went with the favorite team in Colorado. They lost, so I'm 1-4. Not off to the best of starts. Actually, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1-4. Between San Jose and Tampa Bay, I would have guessed Tampa Bay, and they did. So 2-4. Minnesota and Philly, I would have got burned. So I'm 1-5. So 2-5 at that point. Between the Senators and the Islanders, I predicted Ottawa. They didn't, so that's now 2-6. So below 500 easily. Between the Stars and Leafs, I would have guessed the Stars, so I would have been wrong. So I would have been 2-7. And St. Louis and the Rangers, I predicted both those teams, would have guessed both of those teams would have won respectively. So I would have finished off with a 4-7 record on Thursday night. So then my overall record, would be at 62-48. So I'm still above 500, but would have taken a major L had I had a time to make my predictions for this particular night of hockey. As always, if you're new to the channel and you like this type of content, feel free to hit the sub button. I'd be very grateful and very appreciative at the same time. And as always, take care.